need to make sure that you can hear me.
We hear you.
Good. I will begin. First of all, we would like to say congratulations to this first cohort of the Friends Incubator. It is really wonderful to see you all together, and we hope and pray this goes incredibly well for this incredible ministry. So thank you all for being present. I am Pam Ferguson, and this is my husband of almost 50 years, Ron, and we are co-pastors at Winchester Friends for 28 years.
We got married when we were 12.
Yeah, dream on. I would like to start this evening by telling you about a good friend of mine. Walter Mills was 34 years older than I am, or was. He remains to this day one of my favorite friends, mentors, and Quakers. He died 10 years ago at the well-lived age of 96. His presence in our meeting and in our faith community is missed, but the testimony of his love for God, his hope for our world, our faith community, and his witness of faithful ministry and obedience remains. While we don't have any of his living relatives left in our meeting, the DNA of his spiritual life and devotion still shapes who we are as a faith community. Shortly after we arrived in Winchester, Walter felt it was important for our meeting to start a prayer group. After a year, this prayer group morphed into a prayer supper, mainly because Walter loved to eat, and continues to be an anchor for what we do on Wednesday evenings here at Winchester Friends. It's an important time to gather together, to break bread, to watch over one another for good, and to build community through prayer. It was in those prayer meetings that I would hear him pray for his family, for our church family, for our community, and for our world, and mostly for peace. Without fail, he ended each prayer with the words, "Lord, keep me faithful." To be honest, Walter's faithfulness seemed like a given, and I didn't understand why he would pray to remain faithful. I know we live in a world where faithfulness is not a highly esteemed quality, yet I felt Walter was not in danger of being unfaithful. He was faithful to his family, he was faithful to the faith community, and most of all, he lived a life of love and faithfulness to God. As I grow closer to the age Walter was when we met, I've begun to understand a bit better the heart behind his prayer, "Lord, keep me faithful." It is easy, given the challenges of today, to give in to despair and hopelessness for the future of the American church and sometimes for the Society of Friends. Today's world needs people who do not despair, who do not give up, who are the hands and feet of God at this time and place to make a difference in our world. We have a world that needs Quakers who are released for ministry within their meetings and who are released to bring flourishing to their communities. In these past years, it has become obvious to many in church circles that there is a mass exodus of pastors leaving the work of ministry. I personally am not formally recorded as a minister among Quakers.
It's getting juicy. Let them know that we don't hear
Who
them.
understood released ministry and the importance of ministry, the ministry of every believer. Walter used his retirement to work with us, to visit the members of our faith community, and to take us to meet new people. When there was a death in our community, Walter was the first one at the door of the family with a box of donuts. He was an encourager and a minister and an elder. He always made it a point to call me his pastor, whether I was recognized by the yearly meeting or not. It was a gift when he made sure I helped officiate at his memorial service. In a world where ministry is difficult at best, it is men like Walter who remind me there is no greater calling than walking with other ministers in our faith communities. I would like to think that we live in unprecedented times, or that things have never been worse or more precarious for the future of the church in America or for the world. I look back on Walter's life, a life that included the Great Depression, World War II, Vietnam, divorce, and the death of a child. And at the end of his life, the yearly meeting he was born into and served for many years, divided. The faith community Walter worshiped with for his whole life was asked to leave the yearly meeting because it refused to participate in a split. Through it all, Walter prayed. As he approached the last years of his life, when his physical limits were evident, his commitment to intercession grew, and it was a gift to listen to him pray for our faith community and this world. Walter's life and his commitment to prayer was the way he knew how to be God's love, compassion, and grace at that time in his life. The world I live in today needs followers of Christ who are released into ministry, who are active in social justice, followers who feed those who hunger, who stand on the side of the poor, the immigrant, the oppressed. The world I live in today needs followers who work for peace everywhere. And the world today needs faith communities who invest and encourage those whose lives reflect the Spirit's presence and calling into our broken world. Walter's example is a reminder for me to start with prayer and intercession, and to listen to the Spirit's call on my life and the Spirit's leading in my faith community. Faithfulness is the heart of released ministry. My life is richer because of Walter's friendship and love and presence. My response to his life is to have the same sense of calling to be faithful in a world of unfaithfulness, to live a life of service, ministry, and encouragement within our own faith community, and to love in a difficult and unloving world. Until the day I die, I will pray with Walter, Lord, keep me faithful.
I don't remember exactly how long ago it was when Wendy proposed that we participate in this, and she gave us a number of options for what we would address. And the thing that stood out to both of us as she gave us those options was this concept of released ministry. It always, when I think about it, brings to mind Jesus' words to his disciples in John 14, 15, and 16, sort of his last great address to them before the events of Easter got underway. And in the 15th chapter of John, it's where Jesus says, I am the vine and you are the branches. And he tells them, if you will remain in me and I remain in you, then you can go out and produce much fruit, fruit that will last. And in the 8th verse of John 15, he says, this is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. And in the 16th verse of that same chapter, he says, you did not choose me. I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. The fruit that he's talking about has to be the fruit that the Apostle Paul mentioned in Galatians, the 5th chapter, in his contrast between the fruit of living for the world and the fruit of lives lived for Christ. Love and joy, peace, patience and kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Those are the fruit. Those are the evidence. Those are the fruit that will last from people that live their lives for God. So I believe that is a really important undergirding for understanding what released ministry is. And I hope that is at least part of the subject matter that you're dealing with at your conference there together. My first exposure to the whole concept of released ministry was probably when I first read Fox's journal a long, long time ago. He makes a number of references in that journal to the hirelings that were employed by the state church in England to run the religious establishment. It was employment that was based on their education from Oxford and Cambridge, not really having anything to do with their own spiritual lives. A bit later, after I had waded through Fox, I remember learning about the Valiant 60, and I should precede all of this with just telling you we are not experts, we are not historians, we are not theologians, we're just practitioners. We're doing the best that we can. Our only claim to knowing what we're talking about is about almost 40 years of experience in ministry and Friends meetings. So this Valiant 60 came up sometime after I had read Fox's journal. That 60, and they say that there was actually a lot more people than that, but Valiant 60 sounded pretty snazzy, so that's what they called them. They were inspired by Fox's teaching and example. They fanned out all across England and even beyond that to share the witness that Christ is present to teach his people himself. The first thing that George Fox always said when he crawled off his horse in a new place. Christ is present to teach his people himself. Those Valiant 60, those folks that went out as that group of friends, were released sometimes by their own personal wealth from needing a job and making income, but more, or at least quite often, they were released by other generous friends who saw in them gifts for ministry and thought that they should be utilized more than just haphazardly, but intentionally and full time. They were released from the need to have a remunerative job in order to give their full time to ministry of the gospel. Most of them were not trained theologians. Many of them were just farmers or tradesmen or people with practical skills. Many of them were women, but they were all qualified because they were being taught by the Spirit of Christ. They were not a monolith. They were not uniform in all of the spiritual issues that confront us all even still today, but they did agree on a core message, and that core message was that they had all had a similar experience of spiritual awakening as Fox did. There is one, even Christ Jesus, who can speak to your condition. They all were convinced that Christ was still present with them to teach his people himself. They were convinced that Christ taught them a consistent understanding of the New Testament's message and of the witness of the church in the book of Acts, thing that eventually became called New Testament Christianity Revived. They also consulted their meetings in their work. Both the released people and the releasers served as a kind of spiritual clearness committee for one another regarding their message and their methods for their ministry. They were committed to seek and answer that of God in every person when they went out. And they all agreed on a spiritual message that had political impacts. It was not a political message with spiritual overtones. Let me say that again. They all agreed that their message was a spiritual message that had political impact, not a political message with spiritual overtones. Pam and I got started in ministry right after we got married as I graduated from college. And we didn't really understand, I don't know that we'd ever really considered the concept of release ministry. I wanted to be a physician. I did not want to be a pastor. And I never was able to make that happen. And in the meantime, I had had a pretty decent Bible education and did not want to waste it. I wanted to be a good steward of the education that I had been privileged to have. And we found a church that needed a youth minister, and so I continued in college doing pre-med stuff, and we were youth ministers for a couple of years. And then we got invited to come from Idaho back to Kansas, where we had met and where we were in school, to substitute for a pastor who had left a church in the middle of a church year. And we thought, well, we'll go and I'll get into medical school and then they can find somebody else. And I ended up being there. We were pastors there together for 6 years, and suddenly church ministry was becoming a career that we never intended. And that was when we chose to go and work with the Mennonite Central Committee in East Africa for 3 years. And it was in those years that we began to understand what released ministry was really all about. The years just before we went to Africa, we had a teacher and mentor while we were there in western Kansas that was just a godsend for us. And he taught us what it was to be a released minister. When we went to Africa, after those first 6 years of learning what this meant, we saw that as released ministry. We did not have to have a job other than going to Africa and work in refugee camps, in UN-sponsored camps. But we saw that we had been released from having to have a job here in the United States in order to be able to go and do that ministry in the name of Christ with the Mennonites. We also had another term with the Mennonites in Uganda, that as program directors for a team of about 10 volunteers in the whole country of Uganda. And again, we saw that as released ministry. God had set us free from needing a clock punching job here in the United States in order to go and give our lives away for the good of those folks that we had been called to serve. When we led pastoral ministries after those times in Africa, it was here at Winchester Friends in Indiana, where we devised a list of questions that we wanted to ask the meeting. They always want to interview their pastoral candidates. We wanted to interview them. So we let them ask their questions, and then we ask our questions of them, because we wanted to know whether they would be willing for us to be released ministers rather than just hired. That George Fox term of hireling minister just terrified me all the time. So we asked them questions that would hopefully help them to understand where we were coming from and what we proposed to do. Essentially, that released ministry was that they, from references and from interviewing us, saw in us spiritual gifts that they felt like would be advantageous to this community to release full time. And so they invited us to come here as their pastoral ministers. That meant that we'd been released from the need for secular jobs, and we were released to freedom of time to obey God's leading for building up his kingdom here and for helping people with every hour of every day. We ask the church here to understand us not as hired to do a checklist of tasks or a job description. We ask them instead to understand that we had been released to obey the Lord's leading based on our shared discernment with them of the ministry opportunities that surrounded us here. They have been learning that new understanding of ministry ever since, and so have we. And we are still in that learning process now, 27 years later. We have ended up in that arrangement doing most, if not all, of the normal things that pastoral ministers typically do in a church setting. But we do them for the Lord, not just to satisfy a job description or a checklist of duties and responsibilities, not to satisfy a contract. We do them because we want to do them for the Lord. Released ministry requires a level of trust between the meeting and the minister that sometimes goes unaddressed, and it really should be lifted up. The meeting must trust the released minister that they will follow God's leading and do the things that they are being spiritually led to do. It also requires a level of trustworthiness of the released persons, because they need to not use the freedom that a released ministry provides them. They need not to use that freedom to just phone it in or to take advantage of that freedom and not do all of the work that they should do. So it is a give and take situation. And for Pam and me, at least, It has been just a gift because we get to wake up every day anticipating and looking forward to the work that we have been released to do. We do our work with the understanding that God and the meeting essentially own our time. We are accountable to both the Lord and to the meeting for how we use that time that they have released us to be in charge of. We try our best to live simply so that we don't waste resource, including the resource of time. We try to be good stewards of all the resources that are placed at our disposal so that it will enable the most ministry possible from the people that we are with the skills and gifts that we have. From the first day that we were here, we also told our meeting something that we learned in the refugee camps we worked in southern Sudan in Africa. Folks there saw the color of our skin and they saw the vehicles that we drove and assumed that those things meant wealth. And so they would ask us for the moon. They would ask for anything and everything. And it took us a long time to learn it, but they finally taught us that we needed to say to them, we are here to work with you, not for you. And we are willing to do anything that you are willing to do, but we are not here to innovate and do all kinds of wild things that you ask us to do. We told our meeting essentially that same thing. You are the experts in this community. You are the ones who have lived here for long, far longer than we will have. So you know what works and what doesn't work. We are new here, so you need to lead this. It's your meeting, it is your community, and you need to lead these ministries, and we are here to help you and to help refine what you do and to help perfect and to improve and, to innovate after we understand well enough. And that really helped because, my flippant way of teaching them was simply to say, if God has called you to sit on your hands and do nothing around here, we're happy to sit on our hands with you and do nothing. We knew that that wasn't really the case, but we told them that because we wanted to stress this point that we are here to work with you, not for you. We are not here to be ministry so that it will excuse you from having to participate in ministry. We are here to strengthen this meeting's ministries to this community. The last thing that I jotted down here was simply that living that way now with this group of folks for the last 27 and a half years, Pam and I every day wake up thinking about and treating our freedom in ministry here as a privilege and not an obligation. That is the difference between releasing ministry into community and hiring it done. We are so thankful that friends here caught on and we're willing to accept that understanding of why we showed up here. I sent Wendy a list of the 10 questions that we interviewed the Ministry and Oversight Committee here when we first came here so long ago. And I don't think that she's had a chance to look at it yet, but I have developed just some queries that might help for a discussion if you all are up for it. That would be good for you to think about in terms of your own meeting. So I'll read these and maybe a couple of times so that you can let them soak in. One of the things that we asked the leaders here when we got here was, what process will your meeting utilize to reach approval for requests to support public ministries? If you have friends from your meeting who are wanting to engage in public ministry, what process will your meeting use to reach approval and discernment regarding supporting that ministry? A second query would be, how does your meeting discuss its shared vision for ministry in your community? Do those discussions ever take place in your meeting? What is the shared vision for ministry among the friends who are participants in your meeting? And a third query would be, How does your meeting discern and encourage friends to exercise spiritual gifts for public ministry? Is that happening in your meeting? How does your meeting discern and encourage friends to exercise spiritual gifts for public ministry? This whole topic may raise a whole lot of other issues and questions for you. Pam and I would be glad to attempt give and take of questions and answers if you have questions for us, but it might be more just useful if you just talk with one another in response to those queries or other things that have come up. So I'm going to hand this back to Wendy, and we'll just be available if you need us.
I'm going to make it so you can see me. Sorry. Hello. Would it be okay if we just did a little worship sharing for the next 15 minutes in response to your queries? All
Great.
right. Thank you. I'm going to go back to my corner.
Experience I've had of a community pulling together in a time of need and revealing uh, themselves to one another as the real source of stability and strength in life was 2 years ago when I visited Winchester a week after a tornado hit that town. It didn't hit the Winchester Friends Church, but it hit another church. It uh, everything out of a Goodwill store. It knocked the front off the Walmart, which had previously knocked out most of the other grocery stores in town. And Winchester Friends Church was running a food pantry that had members in their congregation who had lost um, much or everything from their homes, and people were coming together to just be present with each other that Sunday after, and I went there to bear witness, and it was a real gift to me to see that congregation and Ron and Pam standing in front of it, just pulling together in this extraordinary moment, and just the sense that what really mattered, that no one had been hurt. Everyone was still there. They were together, and transformed really by this act of nature. And there are other stories of Ron and Pam's time at Winchester, but just that one, which I happened to be witness to, really showed me what Quaker community can be, and really made Winchester Friends Meeting a place that I felt connected to and still feel that connection.
The three queries that you offered were numbered 1, 2, and 3. I jotted them down as quickly as I could. I'm hoping I got the gist of them. And if I did get the gist of them, And I think number 2 is really the first and kind of the bedrock of the process, which is how does your meeting discern how does your meeting share a vision for public ministry? In our own experience in our monthly meeting, there are 3 of us here from that monthly meeting. This is the work that is the hardest of the 3 queries. And it reminds me, not only for public ministry, but for all that we do as a monthly meeting. Do we really do the good work of discerning our shared understanding of what our community believes? I don't think we do. I think it's sorely needed. And in the situation of discernment, then, to reach an understanding that we have public ministers, if we don't do that first step, we're going to have great difficulty with the second step. And indeed, we're experiencing that. And then the third, I would say, well, actually, I would say that the number 3 should be number 2. How do you discern and encourage spiritual gifts for public ministry? So first you come to a shared understanding of it. Then you come to an understanding of how you, as a meeting, can encourage this within your meeting. And third, having an understood process of recognition and naming. And then I would say there's a 4th step, and that is once you have named public ministers, how do you steward? What is the meeting's responsibility for continued stewardship and sustaining of support for that public minister?
So the non-conservative, unprogrammed meetings stopped recording generally in the middle of the 20th century. So the idea that we can't lift up some people over other people's gifts. It's a poor understanding or an appreciation of Paul saying that all the gifts count and are equally important. But nonetheless, that was the feeling that you should not publicly recognize ministries. And ministry, of course, for the first 100 years meant vocal ministry, preaching, feeding the body with words during worship. In the late 20th century, a lot of, by the way, my quarterly meeting that I'm in joined New England Daily Meeting on the condition that they wouldn't have to record ministers. That was the agreement with the yearly meeting. Connecticut Valley quarter of New England. In the late 20th century, a lot of these same liberal meetings started to play around with the idea of recognizing ministries, but it meant everything but what ministry originally meant. It meant recognizing chaplaincy, recognizing teaching ministry, recognizing racial justice ministry, peace ministry, all these kind of things, going to Kenya, to work for MCC. And in my experience, living friends are deeply afraid of doing anything to support Christ-guided vocal ministry. It terrifies them, partly because they don't want to lift up some people speaking in a meeting more than others, partly because they don't want to face the possibility that somebody will preach to them with authority. That's exactly what we need. We need people who preach with authority because people to our meetings. It will make our kids think it might be worth staying in the meeting. It will help us to have a capacity to be witness to the world. All kinds of things could happen. Tom Jevons wrote that we would be amazed if we saw people speaking with authority in our meetings. So my meeting, a little more open to this than most. This is not totally meeting. But I'm a minister of worship, and we've been struggling for about 3 years to come up with a process if we even accept the idea of supporting somebody with a real call to gospel ministry that feeds the meeting. How the heck would we do it? And people just can't wrap their heads around it. And I know that other meetings too are somewhat struggling with this. We have a guy in our yearly meeting, Brian Drayton, who tries to support people with a call to ministry, but it's on the yearly meeting level, and people at the yearly meeting level don't see each other preach. So how can they help each other to be accountable for faithful ministry if they don't see each other preach? Fortunately, we're having extended worship, so we're beginning to see each other preach a little bit more at those extended worships. But anyway, I think that we will wither on the vine if we don't find a way to get little friends to open this up. I can't speak to, program friends or conservative friends, but my journey I'm in is with this particular flavor of friends. And I think we desperately need to be answer your queries about specifically about gospel ministry, about preaching ministry, about ministry that feeds the life of the body, feeds the life, spiritual life of the members. People are struggling to do it. I think some people pretty well, but they're doing it without nurture and support and accountability. God, I said to do it.
Yeah.
Actually, we have friends here from the New York Yearly Meeting, which has a different practice. We have a couple of program meetings within the entire yearly meeting, one in Buffalo, one in New York City. And other than that, it is overwhelmingly on program meetings. But they are meetings, including our own at 15th Street in New York Quarter, that welcome a diversity of theological perspectives. We have Christian-centered friends, we have Universalist friends, we have non-theist friends, and all are welcome. And our yearly meeting, New York Yearly Meeting, does record people in the ministry. And we have a minister recorded in the ministry, and she travels in the ministry from our own meeting. Her name is Emily Province. Some of you know her. She gave the Swarthmore lecture this year, first American to give the Swarthmore lecture. And she is Christian-centered, even though she's from an overwhelmingly Universalist, and we're very on program at 15th Street. Though we have a program meeting, Manhattan meeting, which meets in the same building in a smaller room. And 15th Street is large, and we meet in the large meeting in the historic meeting house. And also, I think there's just a lot of respect for that diversity. Emily Province is so loved in our meeting, which is overwhelmingly, we're Universalist. And she is more affiliated. She feels she travels internationally, as you know, and she feels more affiliated with FUM than with FGC. And most 15th Street friends and most New York Yearly Meeting friends feel much more affiliated with FGC. So, but we really embrace, our Christian-centered members and friends. And I don't know if there are any. I don't know whether we have any Universalist friends who are recorded in the ministry with yearly meeting, but we have maybe 8. I haven't looked at the list lately with the new directory that just came out, but I think maybe around 8 individuals in your New York yearly meeting recorded in the ministry. Emily is the most well-known of those, but there are others. One used to be pastor of the Manhattan meeting, which is a program meeting that meets in our building. There's also a program meeting that is in the Buffalo area, in Indiana, city of Buffalo, in fact. And the name of that church is Christ is the Way Friends Meeting.
Christ is the answer.
Thank you.
And,
Christ is the
and they're
answer.
largely Congolese.
Hmm?
They're largely Congolese.
Yes, they are. And we have heard preaching and ministry from our more FUM affiliated friends within New York Yearly Meeting. That's, I think it was spring sessions. I was at summer sessions and spring sessions of last year, and I would get them confused. But I think it was spring sessions. They were online with us. They sang in Congolese, a traditional song. They gave ministry. Their pastor of their program meeting gave ministry in their way to us. It was translated from, I don't know if their native language is called Congolese, or I think they mentioned it, and it might have been Swahili, but I don't remember. And then it was translated by a younger member of their program meeting who's fluent in English and her family's native language. So it was just beautiful. Their singing was just wonderful and so moving and so embraced by Universalist friends. Just, we want to know about their meeting and their witness, even though we are doing it differently, we all are respecting each other in a way that I think is really healthy. I certainly like it.
That sounds wonderful.
Well, we're not perfect, like Pasquale, so misunderstand this. I'm not trying to create something for every family. I'm human, we're human beings, very flawed. But yeah, on the whole, I think it feels like a good way to do it to me. And I'm serving as clerk of 15th Street meeting, so I hear a lot of people's views. I think I'm channeling my meeting. Yeah.
I could add my voice. I don't want to dominate with the street stuff, but the piece tonight that's rising up in my heart, listening to our friends and our friends in the room as well, is this piece around authority. And it's been migrating as a concept within the incubators discussions as well. And my feeling is that we're so injured by power over examples of authority, that spirit-led authority, and that I think really good at helping each other remain accountable and humble. But I have a question or a query that if we are also able to liberate that counterbalance of, this kind of prophetic and pastoral authority that can live in friends. And that's just, I do sense both a welcoming of the gifts within our meeting and within the life of our meeting, but I also do sense a fear within all of us about really allowing that true disorganizing power of love to really live within our own voices and to really center it and honor it within each other. And I sense that also within myself. So it's not, but yeah, authority is an interesting thing.
Can you just repeat what you said about what is our feeling towards the disorganizing power of love?
The necessary.
Are we afraid of that? Did you say there's a fear of that? Or
I think I am certainly afraid sometimes of the reorganization of the power of love. What will has to be sacrificed, how things will change, what it demands.
Requires a lot of trust.
Yes, trust.
One thing I'd like to reflect on, in the session that we were in with Peter and Matt this afternoon, those of us who were there in the wonderful afternoon session, in the small group that I was in, we were reflecting on authority and because how you recognise authority and in ministry or in a person. And one image, one metaphor was of a bell. If you've got a bell, you hit it and it just rings and rings and resonates. If it's got a crack in it, you can tell immediately it's got a crack in it. And with people who are all flawed, you can sense a thing. It's hard to sense in oneself, if it's authority or not. In other people, I think, if we really listen, we can hear, is the bell resonating out, or is there a crack in it? And the crack, I think, in people is often to do with ego. So that would be my concern with this, is to how, as a community, when it's releasing people, do that testing of the bell. How can a community really sense this person is led by spirit and will have some ego, because we've all got some ego, but the ego is, if you like, being held back. And that's often my concern with when people are within a liberal meeting or rising up above others, is like you want it to be because the bell is really resonating, not because they really want to get there. It's a good word for that.
I want to remind friends that the people in this room wanted to organize a peace vigil this evening, and we were a little over time. If you want to stay, you can say, when I ask you if your heart is clear, no, my heart isn't clear, but I am going to ask that question in a minute.
I spoke once before, but something happened a year ago. Atlanta monthly meeting. I had been there for 2 Sundays in a row, and the second was business meeting. And the business meeting accepted every committee's report without any pushback. And the final acceptance brought me to tears. And Christina Rapoli was recorded in a meeting that had no tradition of recording anyone, that had never recorded before. And it was accepted with 6 or 7 minutes of discussion. And so it is possible. Christina is an extraordinary person, but so are all people who seek recording ministry. But it is possible in meetings with no tradition of recording. A meeting, that's younger than the period that Peter, and so it can happen.
Sounds grassroots to me.
Yeah.
And trust.
I just want to say this is a grassroots gathering twice over, at least.
Can I just say thank you for allowing those of us who aren't in the incubator ministry, where quite a lot of us here are part of Pendle Hill Spring Term, Friends Britain, Friends in Residence, and other students. So thank you, and I hope in the time that you're here, we might hear from some of you who are wanting to be released to be ministers, because you're here till Friday. So.
Are all hearts clear? Oh, Ron and Pam, I will come back and chat with you a little bit if you would like that, I would be very pleased to sit with you for a little while after we release Friends to a peace vigil this evening. I wonder, actually, if before we go, I feel the gratitude in this room, and I don't know how it's translating in little teeny tiny pictures that Ron and Pam might be seeing, but I'm wondering if we could just take a minute to thank them for their testimony. Thank you, friends. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.